Salutations Rangers, General Rally 101 back at you again with some more lore. In today's video, boys and gals, we are back with our What People Get Wrong About X series. And today, we're back with the Space Marine Legions. And we're taking a look at a very interesting topic today. We're talking about the DeathGuard, and what people get exactly wrong about them. So, buckle up, strap on in, grab yourself a snack, and let's get cracking on with today's video, talking about what people get wrong about the 14th Legion DeathGuard. The 14th Legion had their origins on Terra, like all Space Marine legions. Originally taken from the clans of Old Albia, they were known for their ferocious combat as well as honor and duty in the face of danger. Also for their Dusk Raids, in which they would launch lightning-fast heavy infantry assaults when the sun was just about to set, hence earning them the term the Dusk Raiders. And they would continue to serve admirably throughout the entirety of the Crusade. And they would be one of the last legions to finally get their Primarch. But when Morty was reunited with his boys, it wasn't exactly a happy reunion. His first decree was to rename them the DeathGuard, in honor of his forces which helped him retook Barbarous, his homeworld. However, unlike successful legions, such as the Ultramarines and Salamanders, which sought to incorporate their Terran veterans into the Legion and recreate a new culture of the Legion, Morty essentially told his Terran veterans to get bent, and only recruited from Barbarous and heavily promoted the barbarian culture over anything. So much so that at the end of the Great Crusade and the beginning of the Heresy, the divide was so stark that many questioned if they were part of the same Legion, and of course this would come to a head, as despite Morty's best efforts, a third of his Legion would remain Terran, and they would subsequently be sent down to Isstvan III to get bombarded from orbit, with most of them perishing, but a few escaping, one notable fellow being Nathaniel Garrow, who would completely change the course of the heresy. From there, the barbarian DeathGuard would continue to follow Mortarion, while the few loyalist elements of the good old Terran-born stayed true to the Emperor. However, at the end of the heresy, Morty would be betrayed himself by his first captain, and his legion would be forced to serve Nurgle, and that's where they continue to this day. So that's the TLDR of it all. But now let's talk about what people get wrong about the DeathGuard. And the one big thing that people get wrong about the DeathGuard is that they're imposters. They're fakes. They are not the 14th Legion. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? You see, each legion existed before itself. They had their own identity before they met their Primarch. Now here you're saying, hold on Brad, this is a cop-out. This isn't something exclusive to the DeathGuard. This happened with every single legion. What do you mean? And what I mean is that it is the most potent in regards to the DeathGuard. You see, the DeathGuard were one of the last legions to be reunited with their Primarch, meaning that they spent the least time with him and the most time forging their identity away from him. And with the 14th Legion in particular, they were known as a very stalwart legion even without their Primarch. You see, they were known as the Dusk Raiders, as I mentioned before. But despite not having a Primarch, they had a legion and a culture that was so heavily influenced, so well developed, and so well respected that many would have mistaken them for already having a Primarch's influence on their culture. What you guys need to understand is that the Dusk Raiders, compared to the DeathGuard, are absolutely night and day. Now, unlike a major transformation like the 9th Legion, the Blood Angels, Sanguinius took basically bloodthirsting, frothing berserkers, revenants, and turned them into an actual legion with an actual culture. The Dusk Raiders had their own culture, not just the culture of them being noble, honorable warriors who would give their enemy basically the whole day. The way that would work is that they would walk up to an enemy fortress, an enemy army, and they would give them until dusk to make their surrender, to discuss terms, whatever it would be. And if they did, they would welcome them wholeheartedly, they would treat them incredibly well, and there'd be no issues whatsoever. But if they didn't, at dusk, they would launch a murderous, heavy infantry assault, slowly grinding down the foe until there was nothing left. And they were well beloved by everyone in the Imperium. But that wasn't just it. You see, as I mentioned before, the origins of the Dusk Raiders come from the war clans of Old Albia. Now you see, the translation of that as in 40k into what it actually is quite literally Scotland. Alba, Albia. Basically, during the turmoil of the 40,000 years of the Old Night, Old Albia had managed to break away. Scotland transformed into that and they were their own kingdom. And they had their many war clans. And these clans were so incredibly effective, with their armies consisting of proto-steam dreadnoughts, as well as powered armored heavy infantry, that to actually fight them, the Emperor realized that while he would win, it would cost him a severe amount of attrition. And he was so impressed by their valor, their honor, and their stubborn tenacity that he went up to them and he spoke to them. He told them about his dream of unity, the dream of reunification, the dream of empire, and the dream of humanity. And, surprising everybody, the Scotsmen agreed to him, and that's how Albia joined the Imperium. They didn't join it via combat, they weren't conquered. They willingly accepted, and the various warrior clans gave their youth unto the 14th Legion. Not just the 14th Legion, mind you. The Iron Warriors, Iron Hands, as well as Night Lords also made great use of this. They were very hardy and warlike stock, so a few legions had their hands in it. But the DeathGuard got the lion's share of it. So these clansmen brought their culture with them. Also, side note, that means that pretty much every single Terran-born DeathGuard should speak with a Scottish accent. You're going to see that soon. I haven't forgotten about the short series, it's coming. I just gotta find time to do it. They have their own culture, their own values, their own deems of honor and of what true warrior prowess is. They hold themselves to their own code of standards. And that is something that truly defined the Legion. When Mortarion came in though, he didn't want anything to do with that. He didn't care in the slightest bit. To him, they were his DeathGuard now. He didn't care about the old warrior clans of Albia. He would impose his barbarian DeathGuard on these Terran-borns and they would listen or they would die. Mortarion is not one of my favorite Primarchs. He's actually one of my most hated, it's no secret I've made that known. But this right here is the main reason why I could never really appreciate him as a Primarch. It's his short-sighted stupidity. As I mentioned before, you take a look at legions that actually ended up incorporating their Terran-born elements into the legion itself. The Ultramarines and the Salamanders are two very prominent examples, the Blood Angels as well. All three of those legions have in common their Primarchs gave respect and honored the traditions of their old legion. They did not wipe them away, they incorporated them. Vulcan, for example, made the Pyre God purely of Terran-born veterans. Gilliman was known to give Terran-born veterans special preference, and sought their advice in regards to matters of the Legion. Sanguinius as well treated his Terran-born veterans as if they were normal sons. He included them and incorporated them and treated them with the honor that they deserved, honor which they had been so lacking up until that point. Mortarion did nothing of that. He didn't even want to learn about what his legion had done. He didn't care who the Dusk Raiders were, he just wanted his DeathGuard. So he stupidly threw away a fighting force that had for over 150 years brought honor and compliance to humanity, just so he could have his little fan project about his DeathGuard. He didn't care about them. And because of that, one of the greatest old legions died that day. The 14th Legion was originally a legion of honor, of duty, of compliance. They were merciless and ruthless, but only up until a point. It was not excess. The moment the enemy surrendered, they dropped immediately and they were honorable and noble again. Mortarion's changes killed the Legion, not because of the fact that he made changes, but because of the nature of these changes. Mortarion stylized his DeathGuard as the noble liberators, overthrowing the tyrant, the demagogue, and the evil. That was his shtick. But Mortarion was an idiot. He himself had a corrupted and twisted form, where his own form was the best, not because it actually was, but because he said so. He was merciless, ruthless, and utterly destructive to the point of excess. He would not stop until a world was utterly ruined. He would not stop until a foe was completely broken. It didn't matter if they surrendered. It didn't matter if there were valuable resources. Nothing of that mattered. All he wanted to do was murder and murder and murder, and that is what he did. And his barbarian DeathGuard, they worshipped him like a god, so they went along with it. And they too began to feast on this evil that their father fed them. There was no such thing as an honorable foe. There was no such thing as a noble surrender. If a foe decided to fight him, they were worthy of death and damnation. Morty is a bitch. He can't handle any form of criticism, and he always wants to be right. And this is a prime example of it. If anyone ever dared to stand up against the Death Lord, the Pale King of Barbarous, the only thing that he would give unto them is death. Why? Because they challenged his ego, and he can't handle that. This type of just reckless abandon, this hatred, this self-loathing made manifest and rendered unto other people was so anathema to the old 14th Legion, to the old Dusk Raiders, that it caused a rift within the Legion. Now the thing is though, this isn't like other rifts in the Legion, like say with the White Scars or with the Raven Guard, in which it was caused by a few necessary changes committed by the Primarch and the Imperium, and a few minor souls not really buying into the whole idea of their Primarch. It wasn't something that could be contested. This was just flat out Mortarion wholly and completely and intentionally ignoring his Terran-born sons. It is also stated that towards the end of the Great Crusade and the beginning of the Heresy, Mortarion purposely threw his Terran-borns time and time and time and time again into the jaws of death. He wanted to get rid of them. He stopped recruiting from Terra altogether. He stopped their incorporation of their culture. He stopped everything. This wasn't a case of this accidentally happening, or Morty not being too dumb to see the consequences of it. This is the case of Morty actively hurting his legion. He didn't care what the Dusk Raiders wanted. He didn't care who they were. He didn't care that compared to the Dusk Raiders, his DeathGuard were acting like malicious marauders, evil bastards not worthy of anything, let alone praise. He didn't care about all that. He had his ego, and his ego demanded that any tyrant, aka anyone who would stand against him, needed to be felled. So that's what he did. And slowly but surely, the only thing he truly killed was the 14th Legion Dusk Raiders. The culture the Legion was known for, the honor, the nobility was slowly wiped away. That quiet pride, that noble look that the Dusk Raiders had so readily earned, was thrown away with the Pale King's toxic ambitions. And that is the true tragedy of the 14th. Unlike any other Legion, they had a unique identity that was so incredibly not only potent, effective, but also beloved. They were one of the most well-known legions, and one of the most honorable. Yet, Mortarion purposefully chose to ignore them. He chose to eradicate their culture wholly. It wasn't a case of Sanguinius, in which there were certain parts of his legion that needed to be removed. Nor was it a case of Corax, where there were parts of his legion which he viewed were unacceptable and chose to remove. Mortarion wholesale decided to throw out the baby with the bathwater, and he just didn't give a damn. And think about it like this. You have worked so hard to achieve something amazing, something beautiful, something strong, something that you are proud of. A name of the Dusk Raiders. You bore the red hand of wrath, for you were the Emperor's bloody right hand. Then all of a sudden, you meet with your Primarch, you meet with your father, and you are all excited, you think it's gonna go well, and the first thing that he does, on the day that he meets you, he renames your proud legion to the DeathGuard. Alright, fine, fair enough, that's okay. But then, he starts ignoring your advice. The senior veterans get placed to the side, the culture that you had developed gets removed, your tactics get changed. No longer can you offer surrender. No longer is there a noble opponent. Instead of places where you would take them in as honored warriors, you would now burn them in toxic vapors, smothering them, slowly eating at their very lungs because they dared to stand against your lord. And even after you serve time and time and time and time after again, Mortarion just ignores you. He ignores you and he actively tries to get you killed. Until one day, on Isstvan, he actually kills you. He kills a full third of his legion and your brothers. Why? Because you did not fit his bill. Hatred. The ego of the Death Lord. As I mentioned in a previous episode of the series, the Lunar Wolves were murdered at Isstvan, but the Dusk Raiders were actively murdered even before this. Morty slowly tried to get rid of them. He slowly tried to kill them and to hurt them, all because he didn't care what they were. He had his idea of what the 14th was supposed to be. He wanted them to be the DeathGuard, the Lords of Plague. And eventually, he would get his wish. But be careful what you wish for, Mortarion, as you may very well bloody get it. All in all, when saying that the 14th Legion are imposters, there is an argument that you could make that about a few legions, but it is in my opinion that without a single shred of a doubt, the Dusk Raiders were the most unique and most flushed out proto-legion before their Primarch was even a thing. And the fact that Mortarion tried his damnedest to get rid of them, to actively remove their culture and the Terran-born, so much so that their removal actually affected the Legion till this day. You may notice that the vast majority of modern DeathGuard vehicles are not manned. They're semi-sentient plague creatures. The Plague Burst Crawler, the Plague Walker, Plague Drones, all of their vehicles are mostly unmanned. The only things that have manning them are maybe a Rhino or two, and even then that's not really the case. That's because Mortarion was so obsessed with his idea of his heavy infantry and his toxic munitions that he completely ignored the other aspects of war. Thus, the majority of the tank crews and airplane crews that were from the 14th Legion were still the old Terran-born veteran Dusk Raiders. And those veterans would be sent down onto the surface of Isstvan, and they would be culled. Mortarion intentionally did not even bother training his barbarians in armor or artillery or craft. He didn't even bother with that. Why? Because one, he's an idiot, and two, that would require him to heed the honorable words of the old 14th Terranborn. It will require him to give them some form of honor, some form of good nature, some form of respect, and he'd refuse to do that. And because of his stupid short-sightedness, it would result in the majority of the DeathGuard's armor, as well as their aircraft, being rendered useless. Why? Because their veteran crews of nearly 200 years were murdered on Isstvan. I believe that it is perfectly fair for me to say that the 14th Legion are imposters, because in no other legion was a change so drastic, yet so unnecessary. Changes like the Salamanders and Sanguinius with his Blood Angels were necessary. They refined the Legion in the former, and in the latter they completely changed it, but they were necessary. The Dusk Raiders didn't need to be changed. Mortarion chose to because of his own bloody ego. And at the end of the day, what people truly get wrong about the 14th is that how close we were to getting a different style of 14th, a different flavor of Space Marine, and how one Primarch robbed us of that completely. It is in my humble opinion that there are two 14th Legions, but unlike the cases of most other legions, in which case they are loyalist and heretic, Terra's 14th Legion, the Dusk Raiders, are completely and wholly different to Barbarous' 14th Legion DeathGuard. And in my opinion, the loss of such a vaunted legion is up there with the tragedies of the Horus Heresy, with Calth, and the loss of the Lunar Wolves. So the next time you look up the DeathGuard, remember, the modern DeathGuard that you see, they are here because they killed the previous legion. The Dusk Raiders were an amazing legion, but they fell so Mortarion could raise up his DeathGuard. Also, their icon, oh my god, look how hard that is. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you guys agree with me in saying that the 14th Legion were imposters? Do you agree with my statement, that the Dusk Raiders difference between the DeathGuard was the most drastic, and was it drastic enough for me to warrant calling them imposters? Or do you guys think I was pulling at straws here and there? Do you guys think that any other legions deserve the title of imposters? Let me know what you guys think down below. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, and even more massive thank you to my members. Big shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie 3 and Miss Withdraw of the Void. Big shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, and Mr. Corn's Butcher. Shout out to my Corporal tier member, Mr. Bullwin. And shout out to my Private tier members, Mr. Thomas Muslons, Mr. Ivan_SBW, and Mr. Michael Hayeda. Thank you each and every one of you. It means the absolute world to me that you guys sign up here. So sign up for these memberships to join these awesome people. You get early access to these videos, behind the scenes stuff, special votes, a hand in making the channel. And if you sign up with our Captain tier, you gain a special video request that we made the very next day. Yes, I promise. But remember, this will always be free, and you simply watching will be much, much, much more than enough for me. And I would love you just the same. Mwah. So make sure to do liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, all the wonderful YouTube stuff. As I said before, let me know down below what you guys think about the 14th Legion being imposters, and do you guys want to see the Dusk Raiders back in 40k? Because Lord knows I do. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank y'all all so very much for watching. Make sure to stay honorable out there, boys and gals, and I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. If you like Mortarion, that's okay. People are allowed to be wrong.